Welcome to the Great Security Debate. This show has experts taking sides to help broaden understanding of a topic. Therefore, it's safe to say that the views expressed are not necessarily those of the people we work with or for. Heck, they may not even represent our own views, as we take a position for the sake of the debate. Our website is greatsecurity.debate.net, and you can contact us via email at feedback@greatsecurity.debate.net or on Twitter @SecurityDebate. Now, let's join the debate already in progress.
And I brought up the pig slaughtering, which is, you guys know what pig slaughtering is. Not.
I'm from Chicago. The whole city is pig slaughtering. Everything but the squeal.
I'm not familiar with it.
So pig slaughtering is where somebody text messages you, you respond back, they build up a rapport with you, and then lo and behold, somehow you end up investing your money. Not with them. And this is the interesting part where people are like, do people still do this? They literally have playbooks that they built to train these people on, so people are interviewing for IT jobs. They fly, they think they got the job, they fly into Thailand, they get abducted, taken up to Myanmar on the border between China, completely lawless up there, locked into a building, and they're forced to be on social media for 15 hours a day. John Oliver does a great skit where he's like, 15 hours a day, are you kidding?
There was a great story about this in the Journal of Washington Times a few months ago. Story of a guy who got out. He was their finance manager.
Oh my God, it's crazy because it all started after COVID with like the downfall of certain casinos, not like Macau casinos, but like the gambling. And they brought people in, started training them. And these books teach them how to build rapport and trust. Rapport and trust. This is what you do in the first week of messaging, right? And like John Oliver also does a great job. I'll shoot you the John Oliver skit because it's absolutely incredible. It's hard to get people to watch 35 minutes of security awareness training, but I'm sure if you sent your entire company the John Oliver skit, not only would they watch it from beginning to end, HR probably wouldn't be totally impressed with you because of some of the stuff that comes out of his mouth.
So right now they're not impressed with me anyway.
You would die laughing through the entire thing. It's like, who replies back to some of this stuff? Hey, Wendy, how are you? I'm not Wendy. And then he goes, there's this one where it's like, hey, Dr. John, how's my horse? He goes, what? You called me doctor, and I love horses. Right? So he's talking like how you engage, and then it's like, oh, sorry, I thought we had ran into each other. And they've already looked into where you went to school, where you live, who you correspond with, everything about you, so they can pick up subtle things that in the end of week one, they drop something about, one time when I was out in Cincinnati, blah, 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 it's like, oh, no way. Did you ever go here, right? And now they build rapport, start to build trust, and then they start to talk about how they made money on the side. And it's one of those things where they're like, yeah, I can show you how to do it. And the person's like, okay, that's where this stops. I'm not investing money with you. And the person on the other line goes, whoa, no, absolutely not. First of all, I would never ask you to invest your money with me. I don't want to be responsible for it, whether you make money or lose money. I was simply saying I could show you the sites I used and the methods I used, right? Like, this is what I used. And they send it over. And these are real apps that you can download off the Apple Store. Great reviews, 15,000 views, right? Like, but lo and behold, like what they're actually signing up for isn't that. And they start to put a little of their money in. They see it make money. 6 months later, now they're putting like 50,000 in because they've made it, $100,000. So now they're putting more money in. They get their family to put it in. By the end of the year, they're at $1 million, and they're ready to cash it out. And it says, hey, you got to pay taxes on this. And that's when they realize something's fishy. Not only did they realize now that all their money is already gone, the last straw was for them to try to pay taxes on it. In the U.S. alone, this was over a $3 billion industry in loss. So if you're a startup like Abnormal with some of the shitty BDRs, right? CrowdStrike, SentinelOne, etc., you could send your BDR to minimum to work to learn how to build trust.
I think that's a better use of BDRs than sending me LinkedIn's.
Yeah. A big unicorn who's trying to get to 100 million ARR was able to get to 3.2 billion.
And with an equally viable product.
support, you name it.
Oh,
So
wow.
they call it pig slaughtering. So when you say it to people, like everyone I brought it up to, I'm like, have you guys seen or read about pig slaughtering? Right? And like everyone pauses, they're like sausage making, Schneebs? No, not sausage making. I'm not talking gutta here, guys. I'm talking like, and they call it pig slaughtering because the whole like bulls. What is it? Bulls make money, pigs get slaughtered.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's incredible. And humans are the most important element.
John does a really good job of saying, and guys, the point of this, why are we talking about it? He goes, if I can just educate a small part of the population, that maybe, just maybe, somebody will start to question, should I reply back to this? Because I'm going to be honest, if I got the Dr. John, how's your horse? I'm probably responding back. But do I actually think that I'd end up engaging and investing something like this? I'd like to say no. But Dick Tracy, for example, who did her research, who questioned every part of it, still was like, oh, this is a real site, this is real. And people still put their money in, right? Like, it was pretty amazing. So I was thinking, like, off topic, pig slaughtering, the relation to one, something real going on, bring awareness to it. It also goes back to the idea of building trust. Two, tracers in the dark of what's going on with crypto. Excuse me. And like the $22 million payment that supposedly was just made. They knew right where that crypto landed as soon as it got there. So chain analysis, which also they brought up here, chain analysis, they're like CFO or whatever came from chain analysis. And the person at the table was like, so how do you feel about chain analysis? Because I was talking about tracers in the dark. I'm like, is this a loaded question? They're like, no. I'm like, I personally think chain analysis is a good. People question the idea of people shouldn't be out there creating software to track what I'm doing in my life. And part of that is Bitcoin. I'm like, yeah, but it's a blockchain. It's open. It's public facing. So
Right.
if you did want to create your own software,
As we can, doesn't mean we should.
Well, just replace, so I'll play the other side of the coin. Replace the word blockchain with LinkedIn. You've got a public service. And by the way, this goes back to the opening comments. The comments we make may not reflect our actual views. You've got this public service and people are mining the bejesus out of it. They're scraping it. And so why wouldn't you go into blockchain expecting that that's exactly what people are going to do?
Yeah, but
Have we not met the internet?
I don't think those are the same thing.
Why
I
not?
don't think they're the same thing because in LinkedIn, number one, I choose to be there. Okay, so there you can draw the parallel.
But I choose to make
Something.
a Bitcoin transaction.
But I can then choose every subsequent step I do on LinkedIn, whether I want to post, whether I want to like, whether I want to do anything. You're talking about something that is used as an actual currency or investment mechanism that is now I'm being
Pseudocurrency.
All right, pseudocurrency.
The pseudocurrency.
I would agree with that. You probably got some strong opinions of this group.
Any letters, write them, send them there.
We have us with 10 different opinions on the viability of crypto as a currency. But I don't think they're the same thing because I have no other ways of dealing with blockchain. I can't do anything on there that's not tracked, right? And if I've already bought into the currency, what am I going to do? Just decide that, bought an asset, don't want to use it now. I'm just going to let it sit.
Cash it out.
But
you bought in. You also bought in knowing that it was a public chain. I mean, all of this is just, and again, I'm back to LinkedIn and Twitter. These are publicly visible items. Not that I agree with the way people mine them and the fact that they are, but the reality is it's going to happen. So if you're naive and don't realize the implications of taking that action in a public blockchain service, then it's no different than, well, what do you mean they're mining my Twitter things to find out more about me?
Yeah, but here's the thing: if the average person doesn't even understand pig slaughter. The average person right now, and when I say pig slaughter, the average person though, and the idea that it's a open digital ledger, if they didn't do that research, right, to know that the ledger is 100% open and visible to the public, so that anybody can look at it. Like one of the ladies.
Oh, don't
in the
worry,
book-
Brian. Everybody reads the click wrap agreement that you agree to when you sign up for the services.
Absolutely. In detail, and sends it to their lawyer before clicking I agree.
True. Most people do not read that entire thing. I don't. But I waited a really long time before I ever got into crypto. And whether or not I am or am not really putting out there right now. But the fact is, the public-facing ledger part of it, one of the ladies in Tracers in the Dark very early on in crypto when she got interested, because she was huge into cryptography and figuring out ciphers, decided to start doing a few thousand transactions a day, just so she understood, this is when I did the transaction, here's where it landed. Here's what happens if I do multiple at the same time. Here's what happens when I break something up. Or if I buy here, buy there, send money there, buy this, and just keep moving, right? And it was like the idea of coding your DNA, right? If you could put a marker on some blood. And little by little, she was able to start to build a way to follow where the payments were going. It was like the first step before chain analysis ever existed. And I thought that was really cool because when asked to look at something, like right away she could go, okay, well, I know that if this payment went out and there was only one new purse open and a second one, right, that this is tied to the pay. I can automatically get rid of 50%, right, on the ledger. So it created unique ways to follow. So when I was asked the question, Brian, do you agree with chain analysis? I was like, yes, and here's why. For one, it's an open ledger, but for two, when you're committing a crime, one is heinous as where the book goes, like I can't remember, it was like chapter 28. This is after they took down Alpha Bay. This is after, Silk Road, Alpha Bay, and then this. And it was child pornography. But this isn't this isn't what these guys thought they were getting into when they started the investigation. This isn't teenagers. You're talking 1-year-olds, 2-year-olds. Some really, really, really bad stuff. And even the people that ended up having to work it were like, it changed me. Like, I never, ever would want someone to have to watch and see the stuff that we had to see as part of the investigation, right? And to be able to fall, like, it all came back to originally the beginning of the book, an IRS agent who was really interested in cryptography. And the IRS still talks about, like the biggest case to date ever, L components on the walls. To date, the two biggest cases in the federal government history, right, in terms of money, are 100% related to crypto. And it's crazy to see like what they were able to, one, discover, but then go back. And the people that they ended up tracking that were either A, making videos, right, or B, transmitting them and sending them. Some of these were people in the government, teachers, right? Well, people in the government, teachers, or other people. And it was, it's eye-opening. You say, like, yeah, we know that this is around us. Doing the investigation, because it's that open ledger, because of chain analysis and other techniques, to be able to follow it. This isn't like coming into court and saying, analytically, this is a 98% chance that this is the person. They're able to come in and say definitively, 100%, the person who owned this wallet paid the person who owned this wallet. And the person who made the video is this person because he sold it to this person. And that's what maybe people didn't understand, that the ledger was open and it could be tracked.
That is the point of it.
But the same thing can happen and does happen. The whole industry of forensic accounting exists for this exact purpose. And there's been, moves, especially in the U.S., to protect tax revenues, to extend that out around the world, to make sure that they understand where money is going and coming from. Let's leave out the whole part about age verification. But this is not we're using it for age verification, but talking about where money is moving to look for things like having worked in banking, things like anti-money laundering are a huge piece of the calculations. And why would someone expect that a public chain, a publicly visible set of transactions would be exempt from such scrutiny?
Sure, I think the bigger difference though there, because if you're talking about forensics accounting, or if you're talking about a government agency trying to gain access to where do these payments go, there's a barrier in between. We're talking about somebody getting access to what's considered still private data, right? That's still housed within a company, within a bank, within something that's not publicly out there. My biggest fear is I think there is usefulness of blockchain in general, taking away currency, all of that? Absolutely.
As a fidelity mechanism, absolutely.
Sure, the traceability of it is really good. But what really concerns me is now that we are heading go back to what Cambridge Analytica was able to do. Granted, they did it a lot on social media, and now you have buying habits that you're going to start getting of people. You know exactly what they're spending money on, and I think this could be pretty dangerous.
Absolutely, which is why you don't use which way you don't use that. I mean, get back to the public or private decided. Well, I guess no. I think it's even more important that people understand and take accountability for the fact they're using a public service. It's a publicly open service. Why would you not expect that somebody could or would look at it? Your comment about things in banks and other things, those are things where laws have had to been passed to account for them. But this is something that's visible to everybody. I've had to do similar kinds of blockchain investigations to look for tracing. So I mean, I get it.
You're getting at the philosophical argument of being an eternal optimist versus an eternal pessimist. And now I have to look at everything I do and expect the worst out of people.
I'm going to step off the curb, Eric. I'm going to look first to make sure a car is not coming, and I have to expect the car, unless I live in Ann Arbor, is going to keep going when I step on off that curb. So I have to act accordingly. It's self-preservation. It's
I get it, but I go back to, and I agree with Brian, I don't think the average person has any clue. That you hear, well, it's public, where you're thinking, okay, now I'm moving away from traditional financial institutions, which depending on different demographics, there's not a very positive view of financial institutions. Got it, but I don't think they take the next step on what type of data they're actually putting out there and what it could be used for. There's no education coming out around any of that.
But does the average public care? They're the same people who are using Venmo, who for a long time posted out the comments through a public API, and people were mining those. Using this to buy cocaine. And tying it to an actual human name. I mean, there's all sorts of these kinds of examples. And then, the sentiment toward use on social media, the level that things are posting. Again, there's generational questions in all of it, generational differences in all of it. But I guess there's the problem to solve is making people aware more, sure, but anything in the public, we should now know in 2024, is going to get the shit mined out of it. Period.
The record there too, though,
Is that the title of the episode? Mine everything.
But there's a certain amount of cost. If they really wanted to go back and try to mine everything to figure out who everybody is and who buys pepperoni pizza, there really isn't enough. There wouldn't be enough profit gain in understanding that because there's other.
They're buying that from the credit card. They're getting that from the credit card purchases.
Right, and if they really wanted to know how many people buy pizza with crypto, I think they'd be really disappointed to find out how small that number is. Right, but what is interesting though is when you do find a site like the one that they found in Korea originally, trying to remember it. Anyway, like the same thing with Mt. Gox, right? Like that's how chain analysis started. When you have something like that happens, it's
where'd the money go?
Hey, we're gonna find out where the money goes. It took them years to figure that out, right? So it wasn't like they just plugged something in and figured it out. It takes a long time to do it, and then you still have to build the case. So when it came, like the interesting part about shifting from like Alpha Bay and Silk Road to the child pornography, it was like you went from Silk Road and Alpha Bay to these guys that were extremely technical. They were cyber gurus. they had set things up to offer a certain level of obfuscation, as well as the fact that once that computer, you had to catch them with the computer open, which makes it really difficult, right? That computer closes, there's no way you're getting in. Where then they get into the child pornography part, and they're like, these people really thought that everything they were doing was it. That, oh, it's we're using Bitcoin, right? And they're like, the level of going from the case we just did to plugging in here and immediately being like, oh my God, what is going on? Is this really the person? Like, yeah, it is. But it started with a site that had really, really bad child pornography. And from there, they're able to see this person's purse, right? From there, then they're tracing out. So they're starting with the bad and then moving to who's engaging with them and providing the materials, this person, right? And that's where the chain analysis and the companies were coming together to do this. So, like, I look at it as if the government is using chain analysis, which most of the law enforcement agencies, and this is the part that's really, really tough. When asked, are there any governments like chain analysis? Are there any governments out there that use your product for the wrong reasons? Right? They're like, well, when we find that out, we remove it. We don't allow them to use our software. Kind of reminds me, like when we talk from the cell phone side of Pegasus, like, well, we try not to sell our software to people that are going to use it that have really bad human rights histories, right? It's like, do you know?
Revenue is good, Brian. Revenue is good. No, it's
Profit is good.
well, profit is good. Profit's really good. I don't deny I work for a for-profit company. Of course, profit is good. But the define good and bad in that. There's again an investigatory. I'm not talking about the users or the people they're investigating. I'm talking about the uses. Again, there's legal and there's illegal. If it is legal or there's a legal path to it, then making a good bad assertion is a different thing. I have my thoughts on privacy versus not privacy, but that doesn't play into the legalities of certain things, whether I like the legalities in this country or not. The other thing is, you made the mention about people not realizing there's a huge piece of law enforcement that depends on the stupidity of criminals. And you can't overcome the fact that there are people who just don't know the implications of the work they're doing and of what they're doing, of the things they're doing. And if they're doing it in an illegal manner, then why should that prevent, why should, lack of knowledge of the law doesn't excuse not following the law? All of these sorts of things lead me back toward, again, you're doing something out there, you should expect in 2024 that multiple somebodies are going to have eyes on it. Whether it's a public entity, whether it's a law enforcement, there's different groups that have different eyes on different things. But I think that there's the expectation that some of it is being tracked is probably pretty innate by now in people. And it's either just, I don't care, or I'm not thinking about it, and therefore I shouldn't be held to the standard of it. It doesn't play with me.
So to go back to something you said, maybe you didn't mean to say it this way, but it sounded like what you were saying is you were creating a disconnect between privacy and the legality of something.
For the moment.
I think they're directly linked, and I think that's the crux of a lot of our problems, that we refuse to deal with privacy issues in this country. So what do we have? Every state is rolling their own right now.
It's makes my life, makes us all much more employable, but a lot more tough, but a lot more difficult to manage.
And that's one of the problems, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because we're not building these guardrails that say, okay, we know companies are going to come up with all kinds of creative ways to collect data, to fuse data together, to do all of this, but here's the constructs of how you're allowed to play. These are the rules of the road. You step outside of that, now it becomes a legality issue, but we refuse to actually create that. And debating whether GDPR went too far and there's some middle road, a different conversation, but we need something because technology is just going to continue to evolve, and we cannot. There's no box around it.
Agreed. And then this comes back to, and now which I will debate against my own comments. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. Yeah, the idea of
That's
the
not
idea.
a legal principle.
What's that?
That's not a legal principle.
Agree.
I get it. I agree.
Agreed. I'm talking on the right, but this is you're making my original point for me. As much as I don't like that it's true, it's true. The legalities are the legalities. If it's legal, then there's nothing that stops me from doing it. Is it ethical? Whole other discussion.
So we've talked about this a little bit before, and this is on the idea of applications, cell phone, things that you're using, your phone tracking you, so far. And nowadays, when you go ahead and open up an app, or download it asks you, only while in use, right? A lot of times, people don't know that they leave things on or it is in use.
Mm-hmm.
In order for a government agency to track you, they have to submit a subpoena and a request.
Or buy it from a commercial company.
Well, that's the thing.
Oh, did I just rob the punchline? Sorry.
Yeah. It used to be submit a subpoena.
Yeah.
Right? Now it's just cheaper to get it from Google, or not from Google, from a company that's buying the data from resource A, B, C, or D, and now we have everything that we need.
And it's not necessarily illegal to buy it versus acquiring it yourself. So back to legality. Of course they're going to take the paths that are legal and available to them. Again, back to the ethics and the should you is a different discussion. But yes, of course. So again, you have to assume that somebody's out there. The cell phone location data is being mined. All of this stuff is being mined. Why wouldn't your Bitcoin transactions be mined?
And it goes back, like, when you look up, Eric, like, I'm looking for McDonald's. In order for it to tell you the McDonald's closest to you, it has to have the ability to know your location, right?
Yeah.
So, like, people, like, when it pulls up where you last were and it was like Arizona, you're like, ah, there, dumb phone. Like, maybe you should be happy that it's not tracking you.
But this is where, if we take this back to economics, that's where share of wallet is supposed to vote out. Some of those companies are doing that. Like, I keep looking at Apple. Now, I would say Apple continues to do the right thing. That, hey, we may take a revenue hit, you're not going to like this on the apps, but we're going to disconnect and allow the user to choose if we have sharing of information between them. We need more of that in the ecosystem to start creating containers around our data and put us in a position to choose whether I want to share that or if I don't. And it should be only opt-in. I should not be opt-in by default.
Like Adobe scanning your files, your data, that should be an opt-out.
It should be an opt-in. It was an opt-out. For those that don't know, Adobe turned on their AI scanning. Now, I want to be clear, they did not turn on training with this. I railed on it. I got very clearly corrected, and I stand corrected. It is not doing retraining, so documents you do, but it's still doing some kind of mining. I don't have a clear answer if it's on device or if it's being shipped out, but they turned it on by default in Acrobat Reader for the 5 people that still use it. But apparently I did find out Windows still doesn't have a native PDF reader, so I think people on Windows use it. But the fact that it went on by default.
That's not true.
What's that?
I can open PDFs in Edge. That's by default.
Well, of course, Edge can do everything.
There, but
Including importing your Chrome bookmarks without asking. The fact that it went on by default, there are contracts that exist that say no mining through LLMs. Like, you can't, and the use of PDF, I understand why you want to put it on to get the massive uptake, 100% participation, and then you have to figure out a painful method how to get out of it, just like getting signed up. If I want to use your product, I have to agree in the US to also taking your marketing crap, and then figure out how to get out of it. But the same thing here. I'm using Acrobat. It starts mining, and I have to figure out how to do it. By the way, it's also an individual opt-out. And to do it at a company, you had to send in to Adobe, and Adobe's answer was, it's really difficult, and we don't have a method yet. Like that kind of stuff. That's not okay. But it's exactly what I expect.
Eric, you were about to say something before though, and I have a question for you. Have you looked at Monero or Zcash?
No, I haven't.
Because, like, granted, when the book ended, I can't remember the timeline there, but I think at that point they said like chain analysis had ways of looking at Monero, but Zcash was one that they still thought was at this point pretty untraceable. But use the words there, pretty untraceable. Again, I don't know the ins and outs enough outside of reading the entire book, Trace Was in the Dark, and then trying to do my own little research on the side. But I could see the angst when somebody asked me the question, how do you feel about chain analysis? And I took a deep pause, and then I said, knowing what I know now, and reading what I read, and you can't unread or unsee something, and knowing that that exists, this type of crime exists, to be able to use it to trace that, right? Like, I thought was really good. Now,
Yeah, it's an ends justify the means.
So we're gonna go full philosophical.
It's I know this is almost going. This is a tough one, but it's interesting that if I do all of this bad, but then I do this one good, does it justify all of the bad? Right?
I don't know. I think there was a movie with Albert Brooks, Defending Your Life, in which you find out, but not until it's too late.
Yeah. Is this back to like the Nobel Peace Prize? Right? That create dynamite that kills a lot of people. Well, I don't want to be known for that, so I'll create an award that's all about creating.
Let's go back to Adobe. So Adobe, not unrelated to the current thing, Adobe some years ago created an audio engine that had the ability to manipulate audio. They chose not to release. They were considering it the Photoshop of audio. It was the best tool for deepfakes. I'll put a link to the article about it. They chose not to release it because it could be used for too much harm. That's a good thing. Like, that's an ethical analysis. Like, companies don't have to have IRBs like researchers do. Institutional review boards, where you look at the efficacy of your study, the ethics. Like, any type of human subject research has to have this kind of IRB review, but there's also a huge ethical review. Too often we don't think about the implications of the thing we do. Back to think about recent movie pop culture Oppenheimer. The idea that I created this thing that is now can be used to destroy the world. It's a tough one, and you don't always know. But if you take some time to think about it now and think through the implications, you also don't know all the ways somebody's going to turn and change how it gets used down the road. It's not a perfect game.
yeah, I think it's, for those that are listening, the Nobel Prize is named after Alfred Bernard Nobel, who created dynamite.
Mm-hmm.
Most people don't know that, but in Oppenheimer, that was a great part of the movie when they make that correlation, right? And again, you don't know how something's going to be used. The team working on Oppenheimer's team, pretty much knew what that thing could be used for. And, well, I shouldn't say could be used for. They knew what it was going to be used for, but to end wars. But they were very worried about what the implications of that would mean. And
Right.
we've seen how that's played out for the last X number of years. The same thing could be said with the idea behind cryptocurrency. Yes, people thought they could hide behind the veil of it. I don't think people imagined the level of crime that you were going to see. Like, it was cool to see, I don't know if it was Andy Greenberg or one of the other writers, be like, so we tested it out. Maybe we should have got our editor's approval first before we ordered an ounce of, cocaine. But sure enough, it shipped up in a box, right? Like,
Yeah.
they're like, whoa, like, we had to submit it into evidence, but this is crazy. right? We were immediately advised by our legal to go flush it down the toilet. Yes, your experiment worked, right? But you just committed a crime, right? You bought drugs.
So to take that lens though and put it back on blockchain, just to make it clear, like I'm not an advocate we should get rid of it because it's been used for bad, right?
No, yeah.
There's a lot of good that can come out of it. We just have to figure out, when blockchain came about, it was yet another hype cycle of a solution looking for a problem. So what do? We try to apply it to everything. It's no different than what we're doing with AI, ML, and everything right now. Savior of the universe! And it's actually
I'm really just an AI bot.
it's going totally tangential. I think it's fascinating because I still hear the argument that eventually it's going to replace humans in doing all of
I
this.
hope so, if it means I can just like chill out and have a margarita.
Have you ever looked at those? So arguably, ChatGPT 4.0 is one of the more advanced right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know how many parameters there are?
No.
1.76 trillion.
Cool.
You know what the estimate is of the human brain? 100 trillion. The gap between what a human brain can do and what AI, we're still so far off from being able to mimic anything we're doing. But no different than ChatGPT, all of those engines are going to be used. There's going to be nefarious uses.
Sure.
They completely avoid that. But
And then we're going to over guardrail it so they become ineffective.
Yeah, but it's one of those pendulum shifting, trying to figure out where is that happy medium.
Yeah, absolutely.
But the idea of replacing humans, replacing really smart humans, or replacing laborers, right? Because
Oh, careful there, Brian.
right, but show me show me a robot where AI is going to be able to take this
A level of precision and repeatability.
So for those that are really listening, not watching the video, Brian was just effectively doing the robot on screen. Amazing.
Yes. But Brian, you don't need AI. But Brian, this is the thing. AI is just repetition. Like, these robots have been in automotive factories for decades.
No, but they were showing like a human robot. They're like, look, you can pick up this spring. And we gave him 3 fingers. And I watched the thing lean over and try to pick this thing up and then bring it over. And I'm like, you just showed a $200,000 vehicle because the tag time for him to try and pick that spring up was like a minute. And watching him fumble with the damn thing, are you kidding? I think like he can get better.
That's
Like,
today.
You don't hit joints, you don't hit the ligaments, the movement, right? Like, show me how the AI is going to build that into it. There's something just beyond the brain.
The key there is not putting it in the context of replacing human. It's making people more efficient.
You're right.
I agree with you, Dan. If I can take a repetitive task, like answering your questionnaires,
Security question is, well, I'm all for that. And answering them with some logic, because you can't, whereas robot mechanics on a line are about repetition and doing the exact same thing every same time. The nuance where you're emulating human thought is helpful, but it's also not going to get you the last mile. I was doing an interview 2 weeks ago, and we're talking about this in patient safety. Why there's this bearish approach toward the use of AI in drug development. It's very, it's much more bullish on the front end, where you're understanding, doing things and using it to help pick out scenarios that may or may not be viable. But it's definitely not on the far end when you're doing actual testing. When you cannot replace the real world testing. Brian, this is the discussion you and I had in chat, in text a few weeks ago about that's why we, theory will only take us so far. And then, additionally, the other, that's why we play the game. That's why they play the game. You play the game to see the actual outcome that comes, not just the one you predict will happen. If we could do all this without, I think it'll take us and over time, it'll continue to take us further down the line. But the limit of that, as X approaches infinity, it may be 0, but maybe it'll actually never achieve 0.
Yeah, and just for the record, I do feel bad for the AWSs, the Apples, the Googles of the world.
They're making plenty of money. Don't feel bad for them.
Well, it's the data in, right? Data out like if it's crap, right? And when you were building AI 10 years ago and you asked it, will we be able to make cars at a profit of 1,000% like we do tech? And then the robot shot back out. Yes, of course you will, because you are Apple, right? It's like, well, you train the model to say that you're the smartest and best. Guys, you still haven't been able to produce a vehicle. Every 2 years, it's like, oh, we give up again. We're moving. We're going to focus on AI. It's manufacturing a finished good. It's tough. It really, really, really is hard. I mean, look at R.J. Scaringe at Rivian. The one thing he continues to come back to is it was a lot harder than we thought. Every one of my friends that at some point has decided to start their own business to make a finished good because they had a great idea realizes that the production of it is one of the hardest things you will ever do. Producing a tangible good. So at the end of the day, people are very important. If you can use AI as a way to analyze your data, help you create better pivot tables,
100%.
right? So you can produce better quality. Like,
Well, I mean, it done right. You're deriving connections that are otherwise much harder to see between data.
Yeah.
That becomes
For good or for bad. The correlation of the things that people do, to better understand your customer population to create something that's more useful versus better understand your customer population so you can target manipulative marketing at them so they have no choice but to buy. Two same activities, two very different outcomes and intents.
very true.
yeah. And one last note here where
C#.
I don't know. Well, I was going to say the octopus murders. Dan, did you end up watching it?
No, I haven't watched much TV in the last few months.
That was the Netflix series we were talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I haven't seen it.
I had a divine thought and watched it on the exact same days. You could have done a watch party.
It's one of those, again, where you look at the technology and how will this be used? Could it be used for bad or could it be used for good? Right? And the premise around a piece of technology that was made and why it was going to be helpful for law enforcement to track cases, if there's a case going on over here versus a case going on over here, and be able to draw correlations and share data, etc. But if you could also give a back door and sell it to every other country, and then you can see who they're trying to track. And then you'd have information on more bad people. How could that be bad? Right? What government agency wouldn't want to have a backdoor into all your criminal systems and all your files and everything else? Like the more I thought about it, outside of just where all these tentacles went, and you just don't know who's who in the zoo. But if you come back to that technology at the very, very beginning and why that's so valuable, right? And why people look at data. It goes right back to the data. Tech was created.
That one sparked the philosophical debate around Socrates, nobody knowingly does evil. By putting the back door, we can track what they're tracking, therefore protecting our people. Therefore, it must be good.
But then you end with the most philosophical question of our industry. Who watches the watchers? And with that, we're going to close for today. Thanks everybody for joining us. Erik, thank you. Brian, thank you. And thanks to you, the listener. We really appreciate your being part of this. You can find us on our brand new website, Distilling Security/Security Debate. If you go to the old greatsecurity.net, you'll get redirected. But this is our new home for all of our current and past episodes, but also all of the other content that's part of the Distilling Security Network now and that will come. We are also on Twitter. I'm not gonna stop calling it Twitter. I just can't do it. Something old dog new tricks. At Security Debate. And you can always email us. Feedback at greatsecurity.net. Thanks again, and we'll see you again on the next Great Security Debate.